Good morning. Welcome to Opera North and the first inaugural Symposium of Culture Forum North. I'm Alistair Hudson. I'm the chair of Culture Forum North, but also I'm the director of Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art and, interestingly, part of Teesside University. I'm going to give an introduction to the day, but to set the tone, first of all, and to keep the spirit of culture flying high, we're going to have a cultural introduction from the poet Kate Fox of a sort. But this is really to kind of set the tone to move us away from a sort of flip chart culture and one more of a kind of discursive human way of working today.
Morning. Okay, so, yes, I'm not usually introduced as being a representative of culture or a cultural introduction because my poems are a bit more like this. Here's a really short example. Etiquette. I always say thank you to the driver as I'm getting off the bus. Saying thank you very much would be making an unnecessary fuss since he was probably going that way. Anyway, type of thing. So, morning, everyone. And it's really nice to be here. I think I'm feeling particularly northern this morning. And my poems will sort of look at that a little bit. I don't know if I look particularly northern. I don't know what that means, really. But I do know that outside the doorman, outside the Grand, as I approached, said, "Are you the poet?" I was like, how did he know? I feel like I've come as Grace and Perry this morning, actually. I don't know if I've gone too far, but it's all right, it's fine. Yes, I get to do poems quite a lot on Radio 4, and I'm aware of still being a fairly rare northern voice on there. And I think there's some baggage around that, you know. Even when Happy Valley was on recently, lots of people were complaining that the actors were mumbling, but I think they were actually complaining that the actors were northern. I think maybe we should have had subtitles. That might have been better on Happy Valley and generally northern dramas, because then we would acquire the cool of Scandi Noir. Do you think that... Could that work? It would totally work, wouldn't it? Anyway, this is kind of about that. It's called Northern Voices. As Leonard Cohen nearly said, "Stop mithering, I was born like this, I had no choice. I was born with the gift of a northern voice. And hearing it might make some people moan or develop irritable vowel syndrome. But I'd consider it deeply cruel if I woke up one morning sounding like Brian Sewell. If you've got a down-to-earth message, a northern voice is the one you'll use. But I hope one day to hear the bong strike 10 and a northerner reading the news. I met a Daily Telegraph journalist in Hull once. It was the furthest north he'd ever been. But he was all right once he was issued with a passport and a little translating machine. When northerners escaped to Oxbridge in the 50s or 60s from a northern bog or a kitchen sink, they left their short A's up a ginnel somewhere in case it impeded their ability to think. Though they might return sometimes when they're on the phone to folks back home or they've had too much to drink. When Wordsworth went south, his Cumbrian tones made Londoners think he was a fool. So he reflected on his inward eye and sent his nephew to public school. But I can't complain, because even with my vowels, I'm poeting on the BBC, though a version of this poem was written down and translated into RP. Thank you very much. Almost true story. And I know there's more to it than, you know, accent prejudice, although I do think that strongly still exists. But then we'd also need to look at the redistribution of resources, and I suppose that's what the Northern Powerhouse is set up to do, partly, isn't it? Even though a Northern Powerhouse sounds a bit like an 80s disco, or is it just me on that? Anyway, but there are examples that are infuriating, like the 400,000 photographs that were taken from the National Media Museum in Bradford to London so that they would be more geographically accessible. And I think we could have battled that a bit harder in Bradford. Maybe said, OK, you can have your photographs if in return we get 400,000 photos chosen from random hard drives of Conservative cabinet ministers. That would have been fair, wouldn't it? Could have worked with that. Anyway, I'm aware, as I say, that every time, and I'm even more aware because I'm doing a PhD about northernness and stand-up performance, I'm aware that every time you talk about it, you resist making the stereotype stick and increasing it more. I think Andy Burnham might have come across this quite recently when he was saying, in the north, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, you get mocked. So we need to be a bit more subtle, perhaps. And there was a line... lots of planets have a north that was really important to me in illustrating this. Does anyone know where that line came from? Doctor Who, good work. Can anyone go that step further? Anyone know which episode of Doctor Who it was? Yeah, it was the first one. Good work. True geekhood awaits you. Get the T-shirt. So, yes, this contains probably more information about me or anyone than you'd ever wish to know. Lots of planets have a north. Lots of planets have a north, normally somewhere I have never been. You need a home to be an alien, sometimes averages are just mean. I read Jane Eyre when I was 7. Moved on to Geoffrey Archer novels by the time I was 11. Never rebelled with drink or drugs, just Salvador Dali posters and ethnic rugs. Lots of planets have a north, normally somewhere I have never been. You need a home to be an alien, sometimes averages are just mean. I know I've got a distinctive voice, I just think it's cruel the way the word lisp has got an S in it. In a similar way to how it's cruel the word dyslexia is difficult to spell. I've got 2 webbed toes. My eye lenses are rugby ball shaped when they should be round. I think I score highly on the autistic spectrum, which I'm aware sounds like an 80s computer that refuses to network with other computers. Lots of planets have a north, normally somewhere I have never been. You need a home to be an alien. Sometimes averages are just mean. I'm learning to play the ukulele. My relationship role model is Coronation Street's Roy and Haley. I've never had a one-night stand or even a one-night snog. I prefer to swallow rather than spit because then it saves wondering what to do with it. Too early for that line, wasn't it? Sorry. Lots of planets have a north. Maybe some of them will hear this verse because every earthling is an alien to some other species somewhere in the universe. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm going to end with just one final poem, because I think those northern cultural stereotypes that play with and against a definite socio-economic inequality that I think culture can address, I think it's pleasurable sometimes to think about the great stereotypes of northernness, like our stoicism, our ability to just get on with it, no matter how hard things are. And so I think we would do a lot better, generally, during the apocalypse, actually, because we'd just get on with it and make less of a big thing about it. And I did this poem originally also on Radio 4 as part of my ongoing attempt to overcome the southern media hegemony, one flat vowel at a time. It appears not to have worked yet, but maybe now. So this is called Our Ends in the North, and then I will get off and leave you. But throughout the day, I'll be lurking around, trying to sum up the day in poetry and come to that at the end, at which point I step away from being slightly opinionated northern poet and become neutral reporting voice of this forum. You'll be glad to know. So, Our Ends in the North. On the first day the world ended, least said, soonest mended. Sometimes these things are sent to try us, though in this case they'd been sent to fry us. On the second day, I was on the bus when there was a bang and all the lights went out and a chorus of, "Call this an apocalypse, I felt nout." And Grimsby hasn't looked this good since the Germans redecorated. Us northerners are tough like that, nobody else compares. On the third day, the Tyne Bridge exploded through a crack in the space-time continuum. I said, well, I'll go to the foot of our stairs. But when I got home, there weren't any. On the fourth day, Cleckheaton imploded. I said, worse things happen at sea, and popped on a Bear Grylls DVD. On the fifth day, the government said that in London, the restaurants were still full, and we just weren't trying hard enough in Liverpool, Leeds and Hull. We should get on our bikes. And there not being any bikes left, or roads, was just an excuse. On the sixth day, folk were wandering around mourning. Not zombies, just people complaining about the price of white sliced and petrol. Greggs had brought out a range of ham and Armageddon pasties. They went down a storm, and the surface radiation meant you didn't have to charge tax because they kept automatically warm, ambient temperature. On the seventh day, there were no planes in the sky. We shared our last tins. Bunting was unfurled. Armageddon, we said. What's the problem? It's not the end of the world. Thank you very much. Have a good day. See you again at the end.
Thank you very much, Kate. There's an act to follow. So as Kate was saying, Kate will be mingling amongst everybody today, taking notes, basically acting as the minute taker for the day, and then reporting back at the end. And then maybe that will be then commissioned by BBC and broadcast in a mumbled actor's voice at 9 o'clock on a Sunday evening in the future. We need to get on really now to, which relates to these questions of the North about why we're here. And as Kate has very kind of succinctly put, the North is some sort of nebulously distinct place that we don't really know where it begins, where it ends, what characterizes it, but nonetheless, there is an identity of the North. There is an increasing urgency around the North that's being brought about through political circumstances, through economic circumstances, and through really the world changing quite dramatically in terms of how we see things like sovereignty, how we organize ourselves, how we regard ourselves in relation to others. And that's in a way that's a cultural issue as much as it is a political and an economic one. That's had a severe impact on the culture sector and on the higher education sector. I've certainly noticed in recent years, certainly in the kind of post-crash era, that kind of post-2007 moment, there's been a squeeze on things, obviously. Cultural organizations have been squeezed. Universities have had to redefine themselves. Higher education itself has had to redefine itself. The role of culture within the education system is changing and seemingly going in different directions that we can't necessarily find a way to grasp hold of it and direct it in the right way. So amongst all that, cultural institutions, arts organizations, museums, galleries, theatres, and so on have been trying to align themselves and make a place for themselves in the world. Pressure on money, if we're honest about this, has forced this situation to a certain extent. Arts organizations are looking for other options. They're looking for ways to survive. They're looking for ways to adapt and make their case for themselves in the world, but also find ways that they can operate effectively, to do the job they want, to do the job they need to do. Similarly, the higher education sector, which is now driven very much along a different model than 20 years ago, is looking for a different way to operate, a different way to behave, a move away from the town and gown model and to be civic institutions, to drive the agenda. And in a way, these two worlds are starting to come together. And this is, in a way, one of the reasons why we're here in this room at this particular moment, at a particular moment of great change. And to me, it feels a little bit like some sort of, I don't know, kind of some sort of dance hall at the moment, where you have two different camps on either side of the room, sizing each other up, working out what the relationship will be. Some are kind of, in a full-on tango, like Mima and Teesside University, that we're now very much part of the university and have been for the past 18 months. But it's still a new relationship, and it's still working through. And I think there are dozens, hundreds of other examples of how universities, how higher education institutions, and the arts sector are trying to find a way to work together that is meaningful and purposeful and does what people want to get out of it. One of the big issues that's come across recently is this civic agenda. The arts very much now are re-engaging. They're coming out of an autonomous era. They're coming out of an era of art for art's sake, and re-engaging with a much longer tradition of the idea of art and culture embedded in society, of operating in the world as part of our daily lives. Interestingly, I was having, in my kind of first year at Mima, I began having a lot of conversations with councillors and with, in a way, the players in the town, the bureaucrats, the people who normally get things to work. And someone in the council told me their three top agendas are domestic violence, low attainment at school, and migrant assimilation. And he was saying after years and years of trying to get these things to work, what they've realized is this is a cultural issue. This is a cultural problem. This is deep-seated about people's behaviors, about people's relationships, about the way people work in the world. So therefore, the cultural sector, the arts sector, have a crucial role to play in this, in developing our culture. And similarly, we can look at this from a similar angle through education. Because for me, art in all its many forms is also an education. It's a way of learning, a way of operating in the world. And this is also, in a way, what our universities are trying to do, which is to find new ways of learning, to make a case for education as something equally embedded in society as culture, part of the same complex, but nonetheless with driving the issues, driving the agendas. And this, in a way, this is the role that universities and arts organizations are starting to take on. In terms of who's making the decisions, in terms of who's setting the agenda, who's writing the script, who's telling the story. And I think our universities and our cultural institutions are the institutions that can tell that story and help shape the future. So that's why we're here. And I think one of the crucial things we have to do as Culture Forum North, apart from thinking about this within a northern context, is to think about how we can genuinely work together on three strands. One is research. How do we do research that actually means something, that actually has traction in the world, that actually delivers, isn't for its own sake, in the same way you might consider art for art's sake, but actually helps push us forward and develop as a nation, as a region, as a community. As part of that, we need to think again about how we develop skills and learning. What kind of people are we working with? How are we shaping society? How are we teaching? How are we educating? What skills are we developing? And do they also have traction in the world? So in a way, this is the partnership, I think, that can be established between our two different sectors, with the arts institutions creating an arena to learn in public, to research in public, for institutions, higher educational programs, to actually be embedded in the world at the coalface of personal relationships and community development. And finally, on the back of this, I think this can begin to create a place, a way of working that actually starts to deliver on the civic agenda. So really, that's what we want to begin today. The purpose of this event, this day, this symposium, in a way is to kickstart this process, to begin to meet each other, to develop ideas, to talk, and to start to build a structure in which we can develop better research, better skills development, and better civic engagement. As we go forward, one of the key things that this network needs to do is to come up with practical things, is to do things, to get things done. The value of a network is only produced by what you get out of it. People only get involved in networks because they know they will get something back from it. And equally, you'll only get something back from a network if you put something in. So this is really about mutual contribution, about everybody contributing and developing new ways of working on the ground. And so really on the back of that, at the end of this day, I think we want to think about where we go next with this so that it keeps a practical, direct route into the future. For the rest of the day, we're going to organize this so that you have a chance to begin talking and begin constructing ideas for how we might work together, both as sectors, but also as individuals. This morning, we're going to hear from 3 distinguished guests who will deliver some keynote speeches. There will be a panel discussion, and then at lunch, there'll be a chance for everybody to meet and get to know each other. And then in the afternoon, there will be a series of workshops, which I think most people have signed up to. But if you haven't signed up to workshop already, you can sign up on the table on the stairs where you came in. And at the end, we will have some kind of summation, which will be led by myself and Edward Harcourt, who's from John Moores University in Liverpool, Pro-Vice-Chancellor there. And at the end, we will make, I think, a series of proposals about where we might go next. But this is really about working together to drive that forward into the future.